take 1 second in Hebrew, please. אז שלום, שלום וצהריים טובים, שידור מיוחד, שידור שונה, שידור של 2 בצהריים. זה השידור וזה האדם שתכף נדבר איתו, שלפני שבועיים כשלא הייתי במיטבי, היינו צריכים לשוחח על זה, ואז ביטלנו את כל השבוע, את כל הרעיונות, ודחיתי אותם לאוגוסט ולסוף אוגוסט, אבל השידור הזה הייתה לו חשיבות מבחינת טיימינג, ולכן ככה, we squeezed it, ככה לחצנו את זה פנימה, so it's Tuesday, 2 p.m., what usually we're not on air, but we're good, and I want to say this show is going to be in English. The subject is Hebrew, the subject is Israel, but the conversation will be in English. And I want to say thank you, Dillon, for being here with me.
Thank you, Talia. Glad to be here.
Welcome, welcome. It's nice. You know, it's like kind of winds that you hear all around about ideas, about projects, about, and me as a Hebrew teacher for, you know, it makes it makes it nice. So you want to see who are the people behind those ideas. So let's start with introducing you to the Israeli community. Is it right to say that you are not Israeli? You never lived there. It's not like, it's not something from home. You're not running after your parents' dream.
So it's a good place to start, I guess. So first of all, I'm a pretty basic guy. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley here in Los Angeles, and I'm not Jewish. Not only am I not Israeli, I'm not Jewish. And so then that gets people's minds going, and they ask a lot of questions.
Like what's going on, Dillon?
What's the connection?
Yeah.
The connection? And so I mean, look, for me, I had the privilege of working at the Israeli consulate here in Los Angeles for about 10 years. In that position, I served as political officer. I helped to manage the political relationship between the United States and Israel and the Pacific Southwest. That's a region covering all the way from Hawaii all the way up to Wyoming. So very, very diverse area. And, you know, I mean, back then, the consul general was Ehud Denoch, I think a great friend of the community still. And his idea in hiring me back then was, look, if you look at this area that we cover, there's not a lot of Jews. And you have a good Jewish community in LA, in Beverly Hills, other parts of Southern California. But when you think about Wyoming, when you think about Arizona, yes, there are strong communities in these places, but they're very small. And when you look at the elected officials who are in these areas, it's important to have somebody who can translate and speak the language of this community as well. And so that kind of was my start. But, you know, I think for me personally, I love the United States. I love America. I love what we stand for as a country. And Israel stands for the same thing. So we have amazing shared values, and Israel is an island of democracy in a very tough part of the world. And I think
one of the worst chosen area, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's my basis. That's my basis.
One of my teachers used to say, if you don't like the neighbors from north or east or south, you can swim to Cyprus. Like this is our neighborhood there.
Right.
Like, so no, you're not Jewish, you're not Israeli, and you are working with more of my friends, my Israeli friends, and there is a place on the syllabus on schools that offer language. We all know already that the benefits of learning different languages. The brain, it's something that we taught, but to put Hebrew on this plate, that's a unique idea.
Yeah. So again, for me, from my perspective, working with the state of Israel, but then also interfacing with Israelis living in the United States. I began to see an interesting, and this may sound controversial or strange, I hope not, but I began to see more similarities between the Israeli experience living in America and the Latino experience living in America. Two immigrant communities, maybe different, socioeconomic situation, but two immigrant communities who are concerned about the next generations. And when you look at the Latino community, there's a strong concern about forgetting Spanish, right? Because their kids are speaking English all day in school. And of course, you can do Spanish in public high schools, So for families who are Spanish speaking, you have that option. And obviously, there's a big community demand for that. But when we look at the Israeli community, we see the same concerns. And I would argue that it's an even bigger concern for Israeli communities because Hebrew as a modern language is important, but it's also, in this conversation, I've been so adopted by the Israeli community that I will say our community. Even though I'm not Israeli, even though I'm not Jewish, I will say our community. So
that's
I will say
a good one. You can drink for that, You are welcome, Dillon.
I will drink for that. So
you are welcome.
So it's even more important for the Israeli community and the Hebrew-speaking community because Hebrew is so connected to the heritage. It so encompasses the experience, and it so touches on what it means to be to have that Israeli identity. That there needs to be an effort to preserve it, and so I wanted to learn what it took to do this, to get a foreign language added to the curriculum at the schools. So I spoke to LAOSD and they said, listen, if you can prove community demand, we'll look at doing it, and that has to be the first thing. That has to be the first thing. And so that's kind of from my perspective how I saw it. I saw it as a real key to preserving that Israeli identity. You need a good lobbyist. So I'm a lobbyist, and you need a good lobbyist to help navigate the complexities of government.
So we have you.
You have me.
Thank God. Yeah. Good.
And so that's the idea. And I think that the added benefit to this, there's a few added benefits, but I don't want to filibuster. But the big benefit to this too is that it gets Israelis involved. All too often, I have seen the Israeli community, and again, it's totally understandable. So this is not a criticism. This is just the reality. I've had Israeli families come to me and say, my child has experienced anti-Semitism in high school. Our instinct is to just put our heads down and say, just go, move along. But sometimes this escalates. And this is a very soft and easy way for Israelis to let their voice be heard and say, as a community, this is important to us, and we want to see this reflected in our public education. And so when we in America say that we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, Israelis are those people too. And so it's important from that perspective to encourage this kind of engagement and to encourage this kind of involvement on an issue that's not controversial.
I'm listening to you and I'm asking myself, do we as a state, it doesn't matter if it's here or if I live in Israel, as a state, do we think, or do we have a reason to think that to give a room, a space for different languages and country and ethnic, is it our concern as a state? Like, let's assume I live in Israel, so we have from Ethiopia, we have from Russia, we have from all over the world, because is it our job to give space and room for the languages and the cultures? And
it's a good question.
Yeah, you said that we should share the same values, and I'm thinking on the state of mind of democracy and giving place to differences, to the diversity. And I say, maybe it's a good point to raise all over the world. Like, if some different countries live with you, give them some, host them nicely.
Yeah, well, right. And I think it goes beyond just hosting nicely. I think it actually, it facilitates democracy. If we care about democracy, if we care about hearing people's voices, and you look at Israel, by the way, Israel has 3 official languages.
Yeah.
And Arabic is included in that, by the way.
English, Arab,
and
Hebrew, English, Arab.
Yeah. And so from that standpoint, I think that's a good example of a democracy that's reflecting the needs of the community and the community that's participating in that democracy.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you're in Israel, you hear Palestinians speaking very much better Hebrew than I can speak. So I think it's good. I mean, language connects us in a way, and language it facilitates that. And as you mentioned earlier in the segment, it's an example of it helps to foster a more thoughtful mind and more innovative and lateral thinking. So I think that for good democracies that want to encourage participation, I think facilitating and making it an option to cultivate foreign language is a positive thing. And by the way, here in California, we have many official languages. In LA County, we have many official languages.
What do you mean by many, Dillon? What is many?
So I will tell you, LAUSD teaches 11 languages. 11 languages. So that includes Arabic, by the way. This is LAUSD. Arabic, American Sign Language, Korean, Russian, Chinese, obviously French and Spanish. And some
Mandarin somewhere.
Mandarin Chinese, yep, absolutely. And again, all of this is based on community demand. And they're not at every high school, but so for example, in Glendale Unified School District, there's a large Armenian community.
Yeah,
teach Armenian all the way through. Their high school or their schools. So it's all based on community demand. And we have a great diverse community within our educational system here in LA, and it's reflected in the languages that are spoken. There's even more languages. If you look at we're having an election coming up. We have an election coming up this November. If you look at the options for ballots, you can get your ballot in many, many, many different. I don't even know how many languages there are on the ballots, but many. Hebrew is not one of them, by the way. But I think Farsi and Arabic and others that I mentioned are on there as well. So I do think that for a good democracy to function, I think that you should offer languages and offer multiple languages, if not just to help cultivate those who are new to the country, who are newcomers, but also to cultivate creative thinking and frankly, smarter generations in the future. I think it does facilitate. And it makes, and by the way, one more key point, and we can talk about this maybe at greater length if you like. One of the big things that I focus on is combating anti-Semitism. And we know that anti-Semitism is really, compared to recent times, it's at an all-time high. It's really spiking around the world and significantly here in the United States. And we've seen significant incidents here in the United States, or in California. Language is one of those things that can help to bridge that gap. So many people think of Jews as a people with a religion rather than just a people. And they don't understand the Jewish identity and how Hebrew connects to that. And it really goes beyond religion. And I think that if we look at all sorts of ways to fight anti-Semitism, we want to give more money to our shuls and synagogues and temples. We want to put more police. We want to do these kinds of safety measures. But what if we can pay a lot less money and have a broader array of students, young students, learning Hebrew and connecting with Jewish people and Jewish peoplehood and Jewish identity and Israeli culture in a different way, so that we don't see Jews and Israelis as the other.
What if?
Yeah, absolutely. And so
Dylan, do you think it's connected to some kind of, I'm trying to be polite, ignorance? Like I hear discussions between teenagers. I have 23 years old, a girl, and I see the dialogue and I say, oh my goodness, there is zero knowledge. Like even simple things like where is Israel? Who are the neighbors? Something, very basic. People, maybe young generation, they just don't know. They are fighting and running after and carrying flags and kind of sentences about things that they don't know, zero knowledge.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Education and ignorance is a huge issue. And I see it not just on issues related to, again, Israel as a country, but also, and I think to a certain extent, even more depressing and disheartening to me as an American is the targeting of fellow American citizens on the basis of their identity, whether it's a religious identity, ethnic identity, or whatever. So yes, it absolutely is. And it is ignorance. And it's interesting because, I mean, you bring up an interesting point, because we know in the Jewish community and in the pro-Israel community, we spend a lot of money and time, effort, and energy trying to educate people about Israel. And to a certain extent, I think we need to do a better job or rechannel those resources somehow, somewhere, because like you said, on college campuses, I wonder if it's safe for an Israeli to be an Israeli sometimes, or a Jew to be a Jew on these campuses. And that should not happen in America in 2020. And my statement is the following: if it's not safe for a Jew to be Jewish in America, right? And there's this talk about, should we go back to Israel and go home? My concern as somebody who loves both countries is that if it's not safe to be a Jew in America, it's not safe for Israel in this world. And we have to really preserve America as a strong ally of the Jewish people, and especially Israelis from that standpoint. So I think we do need to do a better job of education. And I think that this language is a nice, easy way, non-controversial way to get that education going.
It's a friendly way to expose different people to, yeah, definitely. Absolutely. So the sign that you have in the back,
yes.
Can you share and explain what is this organization that we will all know?
Absolutely. So I'll give a little bit of the backstory and how I came to help establish this organization. So as I mentioned, I worked for a number of years at the Israeli consulate. And in that time, I had the privilege of working very closely with the Israeli community, as well as many different organizations. And I had for a brief period the privilege of working with an organization called the Israeli American Council, which is the IAC. The IAC, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're a great organization in terms of really creating a home and a place, a social and a cultural home for Israelis.
Cultural, yeah.
Yep. And so one of the things that I had seen when I was there, and by the way, I was skeptical. My job there was to kind of help get Israelis involved in advocacy and get engaged in advocacy. I was skeptical going in, thinking that there's no there. This isn't going to be. This isn't so serious. It can't be that big of an opportunity. And I was totally wrong. And when you think, like, if I ask you what you think about the lobby, if you hear this word lobby, the Israel lobby or AIPAC or J Street or all these things, and in your mind, you think about Washington, D.C., you think about senators and congressmen and all of this, and that there are very powerful people having very serious conversations about Israel and about foreign policy. What I saw, not just while I was at the consulate, but also during that time at the IAC, was that Israelis were largely absent from that conversation in America, in the United States. You have the American Jewish community speaking very loudly. You have the Christian community speaking very loudly, but the Israeli community was absent for the most part. And prominent members of the Israeli American community were supporting AIPAC in China, which is fine. But again, there's really no Israeli voice there, which it's not a criticism. It's just a reality.
Did you try to think why?
Well, I mean, yes. I think
with us, as a society, as a foreign society in a different state.
That's
why we would like to be together, or why we will not. Why will we prefer not to and spread all over? Like what's going on with the it's interesting, you know?
It's a very interesting topic. And it's a topic that has not, as far as I've seen, has not been well examined or explored by people who research this kind of issue.
Mm-hmm.
So again, as I mentioned before, you know, Israelis are an immigrant community. And so the distinction and the difference here really isn't on behalf of the Israelis, but it's on behalf of the relationship between Israel and the United States and the role that American Jews and Christian Zionists play in elevating that country, that particular country. And the effect then of Israelis coming into America as an immigrant community and then saying, well, you've got these big, prominent American Jewish leaders, you've got big, prominent Christian Zionist leaders. Where do I fit in to this conversation? There are loud, like I said, there are loud, serious conversations being held at the upper echelons of federal government. And an Israeli who is still trying to find their way around in the United States or try to find their place in this country, it's not going to be easy to push your way into that conversation.
I hear you, and I can understand something inside myself. I live in the state like 8 years. I can really understand those unique people that are pushing themselves all the way up because they have a lot of message and power, and they can do motivator speakers and influencer, and they're doing. But sometimes when I hear stories behind the scene, I can understand, I can relate to those people who said, Talia, it's okay. We need to, on a lower key.
Yeah.
Like, I hear you and I said, okay, I know people that can be that. And I know those, I can know that. I know those people.
Absolutely.
They're here.
Yeah, and there's a place for both approaches, right? I mean, sometimes you have to be quiet, sometimes you have to be loud. The question is, and what I saw was that Israelis were neither quiet nor loud; they were just absent from the conversation, largely absent from the conversation.
It's a way of choice too, you know.
Yep, absolutely, and it's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable, by the way. It's like I said, it's totally expected, and it's the same for many immigrant communities. You know, you look in this country at the Mexican American community or the Japanese American communities, Chinese American communities. All these different communities come here. They find their way. They go through some sort of evolutionary process of finding their identity in America, and only then do they become civically active, right? And you look at the Mexican American community in California. I mean, they had their labor issues in the 60s and 70s, and they have decades of civil rights history to fall back on. Well, Israelis in America, I would argue, really only since the IAC started in 2007, do you really have any kind of organized presence? And so that's what got me thinking to start this organization, was that now that you have at least over a decade of organization, of understanding, I can be Israeli and I can be in America, and I don't have to be ashamed about it, about being Yordim or whatever from Israel. I no longer have to carry that shame. Now I have a place. Now I have a cultural and social home in my community. And
so that's the time to start to be visible.
That's the time to start to be visible, right? Because now we have to start fighting to preserve that culture, to preserve that identity. And when we have issues like anti-Semitism, and by the way, if you look at the Israeli experience, you know, American Jews really have to confront anti-Semitism. But if you look at an Israeli in America, you have to face a multitude of different forms of discrimination. One of them is absolutely anti-Semitism. One of them is color-based prejudice, because you do have Yemenite Jews, you've got Moroccan Jews, you've got Persian Jews, you've got all kinds of Jews, you know,
all over the place.
All over the place, and so they absolutely they face color-based prejudice. So that's two. Then you have what's called national origin discrimination. Because you're from Israel, and because I don't like Israel, somebody may say, I will discriminate against you. We see this on our college campuses. And so you see this, and then you have anti-immigrant bias from people who may not like to have foreigners in their country. So the Israeli experience is just very tough from that standpoint. It can be very tough. And we see this on our college campuses. And so my thought was, there has to be an organization that will encourage Israelis to stand up and speak for themselves, to get them more involved. And here's why. One of the things that I had seen was a growing divide between the United States policymakers and Israel. And totally by accident, by the way, did I find this out. I was lobbying in 2016 to get the anti-BDS bill passed in California. And people thought I was crazy. Oh, you're going to pass anti-BDS in California? BDS, this is the home of BDS. This is the home of Irvine that shouted down Ambassador Michael Oren. This is the home of Block the Boat protests, where we blocked Israeli ships in 2014. All of this. It's a not to get political, but it's run by Democrats who typically think this way. We know
the
yep.
those facts.
Right.
Who is running what? Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to Sacramento and I had all my talking points. I have like a memo like this. Here's the information. Why BDS is bad, why it's bad for Israel. They couldn't care less, really. Okay, California doesn't do foreign policy. Yes, there's good relationships economically, but that's the extent of it.
That's the end of that.
Until something different happened. And that was until I stopped talking about me as an American who cares about a foreign country. And if I put Talia in front of a legislator and said, Talia, tell your story. Because you are here, you're an Israeli living in California. You have an experience. And by the way, as somebody who lives here, you have civil rights protections. And BDS, this boycott movement, is seeking to deprive you of your ability to become a full and active citizen in California and in America. That's when things click. Especially, by the way,
when it's personal, when something is emotional, you say? Like not just you are talking, bring the real people and tell their story. So it's something more legit. That's
part of it. That's a big part of it, that authenticity. The bigger part of it is I'm not talking about Israel, the country. I'm talking about Israeli, the person.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the person, Israeli. And so when you personalize something, and by the way, that's something that our community has not done a great job of over the many years. We talk about all the great things about the state of Israel, which it does. It has undisputed fact. It's a phenomenal country. But what does the other side talk about? The Palestinian people. And it's easier to think of a face and to think of a story, even if it's a fake story, right? Which they do all the time on the other side. They make these fake stories. And we always answer that, yes, but Israel, the country, this, and this. So we're talking about a country versus a person. Well, we have people too. We have great people. We have people here in America. And so I thought, look, it's time to start thinking of Israelis as a strategic asset to preserve and protect and strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, rather than a community that should be quiet onto the side. And so you, as an Israeli, who talk about your heritage, and as an immigrant, you have a right to connect to your culture and celebrate your heritage, just like any other immigrant does, free from bias and bigotry. And it's on that basis that we started this organization.
Okay. I think I start to understand. No, there is a place for that. At the beginning, I thought, oh, you are the new guy in town, so you will be invisible. Don't make waves. Don't rock the boat. All this kind of go smooth. Don't. And I said, okay, we are the minority here, so we will act like. But when I'm thinking about the new generation that now with the corona, they zero social skills, even without the corona. And I'm saying this generation will have Alzheimer and all this kind of memory disease very early because they don't know how to. And I say, okay, languages is a very good angle to attack this. I love it. I love the idea.
Yeah. So getting back to our core topic is, look, it's not, as we said, there are very loud conversations happening about Israel and all this other stuff. That's not so easy to just jump into, So, but if I can work with 300, 500 or so Israeli families, just here in LA, we have almost 300 who are participating in this first survey. We'll describe it maybe a little bit more later. But if I can get those 300 families to take that baby step to talk to their elected official, to talk to their school board member. That's a big step. Just that little step's a big step. Yeah, and actually we have a weekly meeting. We meet nearly every Sunday night. It's me and by the way, one of the big secrets of the Israeli community are the mothers. I will say this: the mothers. I have never seen, if you get a group of Israeli moms, especially the Tzofim moms.
You got the best, Dylan. What else do you want? You got the first. You got the best.
It's really an army. I am serious. In anything I have done, I always go find the Israeli mothers, because they are the ones who are organized and they are dedicated, and they will capture. If you say go capture that mountain, they will capture that that mountain.
We are all IDF ladies.
That's right.
We are all. Just give us the name of a project. Boom, we are there.
You got it. So we have this weekly meeting with the moms and me, and they actually met a few weeks ago their state assembly person, and they had an opportunity to talk to him directly, to ask questions and go back and forth. And that's something, that level of interaction with your government is not something that's easy to facilitate, easy to get engaged with. So this is a great way to start getting Israelis more involved in this, in advocacy and making sure their voice is heard, and in taking an active role to preserve their identity as Israelis in America.
Now I want to ask you something. We are not talking only about the Hebrew language, right? You're talking about the Israeli culture. You're putting it like in a larger place. But the issue is that like public high schools,
correct,
in LA area. That's the frame right now?
For now, yes. So our objective now is to get at least one high school in the Los Angeles area, primarily where there's a large Israeli community. And our initial data shows that obviously this is in the West Valley, very significant community in the Woodland Hills area, Chatsworth, Agoura Hills, and to get one school started. And once we get that one school started, then we can look at finding more communities elsewhere and maybe finding other places. It's very important also to look at different schools in middle school. So you have Lashon Academy, by the way, and this is a phenomenal story. They have great leadership, by the way, really a fantastic school. They're learning Hebrew, the kids are learning Hebrew there, and guess what? 40% of the kids there are Latino. I don't know if you know this.
I was a teacher in AMI school.
Okay.
AMI was the afternoon school there. And I taught Hebrew, and I have Latinos kids. I say, oh my goodness, what is that?
Absolutely.
They are just want to be exposed to it's beautiful.
Absolutely. And so if we can take that model and expand it, by the way, to different schools, maybe around Pico Robertson, maybe other parts of the Valley, maybe other parts of LA, I think that'll go a long way towards, creating a more connected community, and also stemming possible future growth in anti-Semitism. Because like you said, anti-Semitism, a lot of it's ignorance. And so if I know who you are, Talia, as a friend, I'm going to be much less likely to do something stupid that will offend or hurt you, or worse. So.
Something is bothering. Do you think that after when we will succeed, when it will be done, do you think that now in this ignorance environment of what is Judaism, what is Hebrew, will it serve the Jewish community? Will it serve the Israeli community? Are we going to? Are you sure? That's what I'm asking. Yep. That as an Israeli, like you said, I have a little question mark behind my head. And I'm trying to see if sometime to do in a lower key can go smooth and swim this. And if you will put it like out there with the name of the faculty in Hebrew and Israel, will it not bring more like fire or...
So it's interesting. And I think that you have to look at history for the answer. And there are different perspectives, and I definitely understand and respect the perspective that you've shared. And it's not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable question to ask. My concern with that approach is that I have a few concerns. Number one, the quieter and smaller you are, I'm not saying that you're going to be invisible or totally absent, but the quieter and smaller you are as a community, the easier it is for oppressors or violent people to commit acts against you where others may not care, because you have made yourself so small. You have put your head down. You know, it's yeah. So if you don't raise your head up and say, I'm here and I deserve the same treatment as, it's much easier for people to harm you. And so from a fundamental perspective, I think that it's very important that we raise our profile and be proud of our identity. The other thing is, you know, when you're talking, when you were asking your question, thoughts and imagery of the school integration in the South came to my mind. When blacks and whites, when the federal government said, no, we're integrating the schools. And people ask the same question. Is it better? Maybe it's better that we stay separate but equal or whatever. And, you know, there may be any change can be difficult. But I think that in the long run, it only serves to strengthen our community and protect our community and really make us a part of the beautiful diversity that makes America strong. So I think that I definitely hear those concerns. I understand those concerns. But I think it's much more dangerous to be quiet and with our head down.
So in the historical perspective, you say, even it's not the comfort zone to stand and voice yourself, you should do that for the long run.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the most rewarding things I have done when working with Israel and Israelis is seeing an Israeli go and speak to government for the first time. So oftentimes I'll be in a state capital somewhere, whether it's here in California or across the country in Boston, Massachusetts, or even here at City Hall, to have an Israeli go and speak to their elected officials, to stand, and it's a very intimidating process, by the way. You've got this big dais in front of you with 15 people, and the mayor and whoever is staring at you. It can be not a fun experience, but it's exactly that discomfort that we have to kind of get over and say, I'm going to participate. It's simply, in this country at least, it's what makes us a great country in terms of a government of the people, by the people, for the people, as I said earlier. And so I think that we as a people, the Israeli community, have to engage in that process, or we risk being a victim. And I think actually, I will go so far as saying this, you know, in the, starting really in 2013, 2014, 2015, the Boycott Israel movement was really picking up steam. And what it was doing before we passed the bill in 2016 was it was saying, the movement was saying, and the powers that be were saying, a boycott against Israel is legitimate First Amendment protected speech, right? And then what the proponents of the Boycott Israel movement were saying was that, Talia, because you're Israeli, I don't have to buy from you. I don't have to do anything with you. I can infringe upon your civil rights. And that's a place where we can't get to. And by the way,
Very dangerous place.
It's extremely dangerous, especially in America. And that's where we are on our campuses to a certain extent. I mean, thankfully we have changes that have happened with this, the presidential executive order on anti-Semitism on our campuses. But it took that, which even people say that was controversial, but it took that level of action, and we need more, by the way, for administrators on campuses to recognize that Israelis are a people too who deserve the right to connect to their culture and celebrate their heritage, free from bias and bigotry. So that's.
Dillon, I'm listening to you and I'm saying, okay, those people that are listening now, watching us now, that's okay. Thank you so much for being with us. Those who will see it later, will watch it later. I want to ask you, can you voice like a statement or a list of things that maybe the Israeli community, those who don't know you yet, can we be helpful in something? Yes. Do you need some more moms
Yes, yes.
Some more warriors. Like,
Yes.
what can we as an Israeli community here in the Valley, which is, what can we do to give you a hand in order to do it together?
So first of all, go to our website. Our website is very easy. It's israelusa.org. israelusa.org. Go there, sign up. There's a lot of different activities you can sign up for. If you prefer, and there are many different issues that we focus on, by the way. So our approach is that we say if we want, like I said earlier, if we want Israel to be safe for the world and to have support a good foreign policy, we as a community have to be safe and strong at home. So we do domestic issues, we do local issues, as well as foreign policy issues and caring about what's happening in Israel. So please, yes, we need as many mothers as possible, especially those Tzofim moms. You guys are undefeatable. You guys are undefeatable. Absolutely.
They are the Tzahal, yes.
They are the Tzahal. So go to our website, sign up, please, and we will be in touch with you. There's a lot of things going on. We definitely need help with this survey. So just to be clear on the survey, what we're doing, we need to get as many families as possible to fill out this survey and submit the results. The results are anonymous. Your name is not going to go out there. There's no private information shared. But our goal with the survey is simply to do the following. It's simply to say that geographically, in this geographic area, we have X number of families who over this many years will have children going into your public high school. And so we can demonstrate that for these many years, we have a sustainable Hebrew program. And that's all we need. And so, so please, if you'll go to our, you can find us on Facebook. It's all listed, or israelusa.org. And please take the survey. That would be, and sign up for updates.
We can ask Orly. Orly, please, if you are with us, please put few times during these comments of this interview, copy paste the link.
Yep.
That our community, it will be access. Okay, Beseder.
Yep.
Orly will do that for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Orly.
Orly, you are doing everything, so we love you, Orly.
Orly is the best. Orly is absolutely the best.
מתוקה. You know what is מתוקה?
כן.
אתה יודע? You know
I
מתוקה?
do.
Oh.
I do.
So you have a nice and rich vocabulary, Dylan.
I don't know if I have a rich vocabulary. I know the important words.
It's very important. Orly, we love you.
Hamud is a good one too, right? Is that one that we like?
For male, Hamuda is for female.
Exactly.
So Metuka is a little nicer, sweeter than Hamuda.
Sweeter, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely. So I want to tell you something. I'm sitting in a group called Gvanim with the IAC that are dealing with the bridging between Jewish community, Israel community. Is there a bridging? Should be? Can it be? Is it important to? Can we build a bridge? Will it survive? Question that like with different size colors of the religions, like the reforms, that for Israeli, it's something very new to see a rabbi, a lady rabbi. We are dealing with a lot of them. I'm saying, you are talking about the Israeli community. Will it be nice or smart or interesting to bring on board the Jewish community too?
Yes. So I sense a couple of different questions in that question. So for the Hebrew language program specifically, we're looking for every community to be a part of it. From our perspective, for the Hebrew language program specifically, we absolutely, the core thought there is for those Israeli parents who are here. I have dear friends who have young children who they're not wealthy, they cannot afford private schools, you know.
Sure.
But they want their kids to learn Hebrew, and they're paying out of pocket now for different courses and things. So I want those friends and those residents here of LA to have the same opportunity as other immigrants to be able to put their kids in Hebrew school. That's the core thing. Beyond that, I think the secondary concern is other communities, not even Jewish communities, but Latino communities, African-American communities. There are charter schools in New York City where a majority of the students are African-American. I mean, that's phenomenal. I think that's a fantastic thing to see different communities of color participating in these important programs. I will say that there is concern, again, speaking on the Hebrew program, there is concern about private schools and will this diminish and will this reduce? I don't think so, and I'll say why. We've had many decades in the LA area. By the way, it used to be in the 70s and 80s that Hebrew was taught at public schools.
Oh.
Hebrew was taught at LAUSD public schools in the Fairfax area, where Cantor's Fairfax High School.
There, right.
Yeah. And so when the demographics changed and the community demands changed, the school offering changed. And thankfully now there's an approach where we do want more diverse languages, and so Hebrew can be. And Hebrew is, if you transfer into LAUSD with Hebrew classes, you get those credits with you, and you can graduate from high school with that, and so on and so forth. And so with regard to the public schools, I actually think that increasing the number of students who are taking Hebrew will simply create a richer and more vibrant and healthier marketplace of Hebrew students than otherwise, right? So that means you're going to need more tutoring after school. You're going to need more classes. So it will elevate, I think, the professionalism of Hebrew teachers too. Because, we have great Hebrew teachers like you, like Orly, and others who will be able to get more engaged in these communities. And so I think that it will be good all the way around. And so that's my answer on Hebrew with
we are talking about high schools.
Yes.
Can we like an idea duplicate Lashon Academy for a few, like the West Valley, why if it's a good idea and a good why it should be by itself in the east side of the why can't we have another one? It serves the whole community, not only the Israeli one. It serves the Latinos. It serves
We could. I guess we could. I mean, I don't know what I personally don't know the history of Lashon and how they came to that decision of doing it there and for that community. I do know that they're looking to open up another campus in the city, I think. Yeah, they're opening up another campus in the city. I think it was supposed to be this year, but obviously this year is kind of a wash for everybody.
I have a friend, Dillon, that her daughter learns in San Diego University, and she has Hebrew there. Hebrew 1, 2.
Yeah. I know a good Hebrew teachers there too, by the way. I know good Hebrew teachers there. Yeah.
So can we duplicate you?
Me? I wish.
You're fighting for LAUSD, and I'm thinking, okay, it's very nice. We are a big place, but it's like America. It's so local. And can we have some Dillons around?
Yeah, so we do need to do that because I am not going to be around forever, and I, and I can't do everything at once, though.
Oh.
So I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But rest assured.
We hope so.
But to me, the answer for that is to get more people like you, more people like Orly, more people like Ilanit. Again, taking this first step is the first step to then be engaging on an array of issues. And really what we want to do is take LA as a pilot and say, here's what we did well, here's what we could have done better, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, and then move forward. And so once we do it for LA, we can then go to different areas. I do know that in San Diego, I think there's a high school, charter school maybe that's doing Hebrew. So there are options. Most of them are charter schools across the country. But Chicago, for example, has many public high schools that are Hebrew. I think that's the biggest city actually in the country that's teaching Hebrew. Again, large African-American. Chicago, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh my God, Chicago, we love you.
So for us here, this will be, driven by the Israeli community, and hopefully will serve as an example for other cities to follow. But I sensed in your question that you weren't just talking about Hebrew when you talked about the connection, the bridge between Israelis and the Jewish community. And
it's more it's language. It's more than language.
Absolutely.
You can sit with someone that is Jewish, and the gaps are enormous. You know, it's like it's not the same.
Yes, and so I have a perspective on this, and I think it's an important issue. And I'll give my perspective with the disclaimer that, again, I'm speaking as somebody who's not Jewish, who does not have that Jewish background. And as somebody obviously who's not Israeli, but maybe that perspective is interesting and can offer kind of a different point of view. You said it very simply. The experiences are different. The culture is different. And what I see, and I've seen this really since I've been working with this community, is an effort to somehow create a bridge, to create a connection, and to create almost like a third category of whatever this is, whatever it is when you put the two together and it operates.
Baby born.
Yes, exactly. It creates some sort of harmony. I think that's fine to a certain extent. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that approach. I don't know how effective it is within generations, maybe in successive generations as Israeli children become more American and so forth. I have always thought, though, on this particular question, that it should be okay for Israelis to be Israeli, for American Jews to be American Jews, and to understand that there are differences between the two, to understand what those differences are, and then to respect and actually celebrate those differences. So one major difference between the two communities, and this is for me, we're an organization that's a policy organization, right? So we deal with legislation, policy, and politics and things. So one of the key differences for me is the immigration experience. Israelis came to this country from the Middle East. Israelis maybe they served in the military, maybe they didn't, whatever. All sorts of different narratives to come and be an American in this country, to be a new American in this country. Many American Jews don't have that experience. Their families have been here for decades, if not longer, if not for hundreds of years. My family came here in 1630s from England. So I don't have that coming to a new country experience.
Yeah.
That one difference alone, the immigrant experience versus the non-immigrant experience, has a huge impact on how you see the world and how you interact with the world. And there will
it's like you see the world in totally different glasses.
Absolutely. And so the question is first of all, do Israelis see themselves as immigrants? Usually I think the answer is no, right? Because we see immigrants as, oh, it's an outsider, it's whatever, it's kind of a dirty word almost. I think that we need to not do that. I think that being an immigrant, there's nothing wrong with wanting to come to America and building a different life. But I also see efforts where it's like we're trying to ignore that history, ignore that immigrant narrative, and try to immediately jump to become like we've been here for hundreds of years. And I don't see that that's a realistic. Thing to try. I think it's actually disrespectful too for the uniqueness of what makes an Israeli, right? And I love Israelis. I mean, I prefer Israelis almost to any community, I think. Any community. Not almost, it's any community. So I think my answer is, I think that it's okay to first of all, understand the differences, to respect those differences, and to celebrate diversity within the Jewish community. The one thing I will say to that, though, is that Israelis have to be louder, because if you can imagine anybody saying that, Israelis have to be louder.
Very, very problematic sentence. Louder in a different way of
exactly.
doesn't mean לא לצעוק יותר, אנחנו בסדר, לא לצעוק יותר. Yes.
Israelis need to be more seen and to not be afraid to be Israeli. I think it's a beautiful identity. It's a beautiful culture. Israelis are a beautiful people, and we need to see more of it. And what I found is that the more elected officials know you, know who you are, and know your history, the better it is for Israel, and the better it is for your community.
I love it. I hear you, and my soul is smiling. I love it because it feels comfortable. You know, someone says, you don't have to bridge yourself with someone, not the Latino, not the Black, the African American, not the Jewish. You don't have to merge. It's okay to be a neighbor and not to live on the same house. It's okay to be different.
Absolutely.
It's really okay.
Absolutely. And I think as somebody who cares about Israel, as somebody who cares deeply for Israel, and again, who cares deeply because it's a great democracy that shares our values in a very tough part of the world, there is nobody better on earth to talk about that country and to explain that country than you. And who you are as an Israeli, your family, your friends. There is no better ambassador to the state of Israel than Israelis living in America. But
that's true, Dylan, for everything. Like if you are looking for the authentic representative or the ambassador, you have to take someone from that's true for everything.
But the problem is, and this gets back to your earlier question, is for too long, I say we in our community have been allowing others to tell our story for us, right?
Yes, someone she asked, who is we? When you say we, who is we? We are the Americans that are getting immigrants to their society. This is the we?
No, when I say we, I mentioned earlier, I'm speaking as an adopted
Israeli.
As an adopted Israeli.
Yeah. We is okay, good.
תקשיבי ותקשיבי טוב. I'll tell you a story. No.
תקשיבי טוב, רבקה, הוא אומר לך מי זה.
Rivka.
רבקה דורי, you know her, right?
Oh, I know Rivka. Yes. Of course, Rivka's great. So Rivka, when I say we, what I mean is that in the Israeli community, and as somebody who works with the Israeli community, we need to make sure that we are not letting others tell our story for us.
Yeah.
Whether it's an American Jewish person or a Christian person who cares about Israel for whatever reason, nobody else can tell your story better. And for too long, we've been allowing those other communities to speak up. And so that's what we're really all about, is empowering Israelis to speak up and use their voice.
Good. So listen, I want to repeat something before, because
time went fast.
Guys, we are, it's 3 minutes before 3 o'clock. It's unbelievable. Like an hour. I just want to repeat. לכל האימהות הישראליות. You understand Hebrew. You can understand me. Orly, let me know in advance. טליה, be careful. go. לכל האימהות הישראליות. אותן אימהות שזה בדם שלהם, שהן רותחות, שהן רוצות לעשות שינוי, שהן רוצות לשמר שפה, שהן רוצות לשמר תרבות, שפוחדות מהתבוללות אולי, יש כאלה שכן, יש כאלה שלא. יש אפשרות, יש פה איש יקר לקהילה הישראלית, שרץ ומריץ את חייו בשביל להרים את זה, להרים את התרבות, את השפה לפאבליק סקולס, לתיכונים. כשהפיוניר הזה, כשהמפעל הזה יצליח וישכפל אותו למקומות אחרים, יכול להיות שאנחנו נזכור ונודה על ההתחלה הזאת. אבל יש פה אתר אינטרנט, זה israelusa.com, israelusa.org, israelusa, one word.org, אורלי תשים את זה ברשימה. יש שם סקר, פשוט אנונימי, תיכנסו, תכניסו פרטים. אנחנו עוזרות לאנשים כמו דילן לעזור לנו, זאת אומרת, יותר יפה מזה לא יכול להיות. ואורלי תשים את הלינק וכולנו נעשה את זה. What else can we do in order to show you how much we appreciate your job?
Gosh, just keep being you. Just keep being you.
Oh, yeah.
Keep being you. And I would love to, this has really been fantastic. I'd love to come back maybe in a few months and update you guys on the progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, look, I mean, you have a great platform here. You have a great audience. And I think that, like I said, celebrate being Israeli as much and as loud and as big as possible. There's nothing wrong with that.
Loud is a different definition. I'm just making sure we all understand the loud.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you guys for being here. תודה רבה לכל מי שאיתנו. Thank you for being now. Thank you for listening later. You're all very, very appreciated and welcome. דילן, אני רוצה להגיד לך תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
It was my pleasure.
My honor.
לדעת, עכשיו אני אעשה בעברית, I will challenge you in Hebrew. זה הכבוד שלי לדעת שיש אנשים לא יהודים ולא ישראלים שמבינים, עד עכשיו we are okay? אוקיי. שמבינים את חשיבות, importance, של מה שאתה עושה, שזה כל כך חשוב, and you are doing it with so much passion and love. ואני רוצה to thank you on behalf of all my friends here, all the Jewish and Israeli, especially the Israeli community. Hopefully we will meet in a few months and you will update us. Maybe we will have a new Lashon Academy, although it's elementary school, but it will feed the junior and the high. עוד לשון אקדמי אחד, עוד תוכנית אחת. It will be so, every little victory will, it's a big one. It's a big
Absolutely. One. That's true. That is true. Talia, תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
Thank you.
Pleasure. תודה רבה. I wish you good luck. Your luck is our luck. Your success is our success.
Vice versa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. See you.